I knew something was wrong the moment I saw the perfectly arranged table and their overly eager smiles. My instincts saved me from becoming a victim of my own children. My name is Helena Almeida, and at 68 years old I thought I understood the meaning of betrayal. The weight of my wedding band had barely faded from my finger when I began to see the truth about my family. My husband João passed away 9 years ago after 43 years of marriage, leaving me alone in our modest apartment in downtown Florianopolis. The ceramic factory where I had worked as financial controller for 35 years became my sanctuary, numbers and ledgers the language I understood best when words failed me. I found solace in the orderly rows of figures, each column balanced. To the centavo, unlike the messy equations of family relationships, the factory owners had asked me to stay on past retirement age, valuing my expertise and institutional memory. I gladly accepted, preferring productivity to the hollow silence of an empty home. The apartment João and I shared for 4 decades remained largely unchanged after his passing. His reading glasses still rested on the side table by his favorite armchair. His fishing hat hung on the hook by the door, as if waiting for the next weekend excursion that would never come. I kept these small reminders of him close, finding comfort in the familiar. The neighborhood around us had changed gradually over the years. Small local businesses replaced by coffee chains and boutique shops catering to younger professionals. Yet our building remained a stalwart reminder of simpler times, its faded, yellow paint and wrought iron balconies speaking of another era in this coastal city. My morning routine never varied. I woke at 5:30, prepared a simple breakfast of coffee and toast, reviewed financial news on my tablet, and left for work by 7. The bus route to the factory cut through the heart of the city, from the older central district to the industrial zone on the outskirts. I knew every turn, every stop, every face of the regular passengers who shared this journey with me. The predictability brought peace to my days, creating structure in a life that had lost its central pillar when João departed. The evenings followed a similar pattern. Dinner alone at my small kitchen table, a telephone call with my granddaughter Livia when possible, and an hour of reading before sleep. Weekends meant grocery shopping, light housekeeping, and occasional lunches with former colleagues. It was a modest life, but one filled with dignity and independence. I needed little and valued what I had. My daughter Bianca had always been beautiful and ambitious. Her hunger for status consumed her like a fever that never broke. From childhood she had yearned for things beyond our middle-class means, comparing our holidays in nearby coastal towns to her schoolmates' international vacations. Her academic performance had been adequate but unexceptional, her talents lying more in social navigation than scholarly pursuits. She married Marcelo when they were both 24 years old, a charming man with grand ideas but little patience, for the slow climb to success. I had recognized something troubling in his easy confidence even then, a sense that he believed himself entitled to rewards without the corresponding effort. But Bianca had been besotted with his promises of the life she had always coveted, and my gentle concerns were dismissed as outdated thinking. They moved into a sprawling mansion in Jurerê Internacional, the playground of the wealthy and connected. The property featured 5 bedrooms, a swimming pool with ocean views, and landscaped gardens maintained by a full-time gardener. Their daughter Livia attended the most prestigious bilingual school in the state, where annual tuition exceeded what many families earned in a year. Imported vehicles filled their garage, replaced with new models whenever fashion dictated. Their social media accounts showcased exotic vacations and designer clothes. Skiing in Bariloche during winter, shopping in Miami each spring, European capitals in summer. Their kitchen had been featured in a glossy home magazine, the custom marble countertops and professional-grade appliances highlighted as examples of discerning taste. They were living the dream, or so everyone thought. What no one knew was that I funded it all. Every centavo came from my savings and pension. The comfortable retirement João and I had carefully planned for decades had been redirected to support a lifestyle I neither understood nor approved of. 15 years ago, I established a trust that delivered 20,000 reais every month directly to their mortgage, school fees, and business ventures. The decision came after weeks of tearful conversations with Bianca, who claimed they faced temporary financial difficulties that threatened to derail their promising future. I had signed the paperwork with love and hope, believing the arrangement would be short-term until Marcelo's business ventures found firm footing. The attorney had suggested a revocation clause, and I agreed without much thought. I would never need it, I was certain. Family takes care of family. 5 years passed, then 10, then 15. The temporary assistance became permanent support, an invisible foundation upon which they built an empire of appearances. Marcelo launched one business after another, each beginning with enthusiastic projections and ending in quiet failure. A restaurant concept that closed within 18 months, an import business that never secured the necessary contracts, a tech startup that produced nothing beyond an expensive logo and website. Each time he approached the next venture with undiminished confidence, explaining away previous failures as valuable learning experiences. Meanwhile, Bianca cultivated a growing circle of influential friends, hosting elaborate dinner parties and charity events that seemed designed primarily to cement their social position. The monthly transfers from my account continued without acknowledgement or gratitude, as if the money materialized from thin air rather than from my lifetime of careful saving. Bianca rarely invited me to their home. My sensible clothes and practical handbags embarrassed her among her sophisticated friends. My calloused hands revealed a lifetime of work, contrasting sharply with the manicured perfection of her social circle. My accent and expressions revealed my humble origins, the very same background that had given her the opportunity to rise above it. João and I had sacrificed consistently to provide Bianca with educational opportunities neither of us had enjoyed. We had worked extra shifts and weekends to afford English classes and dance lessons and summer programs that might expand her horizons. Now those horizons had expanded so far that they no longer included space for the people who had made it possible. On the rare occasions when she did extend an invitation, it was usually for family holidays, when my absence would raise questions among relatives who still valued traditional bonds. When I did visit, Marcelo would smile too widely and talk too loudly about his latest business venture. He would guide me through elaborate pitches, complete with projections and market analyses, emphasizing the exclusive nature of the opportunity and the impressive investors already committed. I nodded and smiled, while mentally calculating how much of my money he had already wasted. The sums were staggering when tallied over years of failed enterprises. He never asked about my work or interests, treating me primarily as a potential source of additional funding rather than family. After these presentations, he would invariably disappear to make important calls or attend urgent meetings, leaving Bianca to manage my visit with poorly concealed impatience. Livia was different. She would sit beside me and ask about my life, genuinely interested in my stories. She inherited my facility with numbers, often discussing her advanced mathematics classes with enthusiasm that mirrored my own at her age. She had her father's charm, but none of his emptiness. She had her mother's beauty, but none of her cruelty. Where Bianca saw my modest lifestyle as something to escape and disguise, Livia found authenticity worth exploring. When she was younger, she would spend weeks of summer vacation in my apartment, content with simple pleasures like baking traditional cookies or exploring the public markets. As she grew older, these visits became less frequent, her schedule increasingly filled with activities designed to build the perfect college application. Still, she made time for regular phone calls and occasional lunch dates when her parents were occupied elsewhere. Each time I saw my granddaughter, I recognized something of myself in her eyes, a quiet assessment of the world around her. She was almost 18 now, nearly a woman with her own path to find. The invitation arrived on expensive paper with gold embossing, delivered by a courier service rather than regular mail. The envelope itself spoke of exclusivity and expense, thick cream paper with my name written in professional calligraphy. Inside, the card announced a dinner party at their residence, specifically mentioning that the gathering was in my honor. Bianca called it a celebration dinner in my honor, to thank me for everything I had done for them. The date was set for the following Saturday. The dress code specified as formal. A handwritten note from Bianca expressed sudden appreciation for my years of support and guidance, language so unlike her usual communications that suspicion immediately flared within me. I knew better than to believe such sudden appreciation. Nothing about my daughter had ever been genuine. Even as a child, she had offered affection strategically, when gifts or permissions were desired. Still, I accepted with grace and curiosity. Something had changed, and I needed to understand what they were planning. The days leading up to the dinner brought an unusual flurry of attention from Bianca. Daily phone calls confirmed my attendance, verified my favorite foods had been included in the menu, asked about any special accommodations I might require. The solicitousness was unprecedented and deeply unsettling. Marcelo even called personally to express his excitement about finally celebrating my contributions to their success. His voice carried the same excessive enthusiasm he typically reserved for business pitches, setting off further warning signals in my mind. I prepared carefully for the evening, selecting my best outfit and arranging for a taxi rather than taking the bus. Whatever scenario awaited me, I would face it with dignity and clarity. Their mansion stood tall and imposing against the evening sky, dramatically lit by carefully positioned landscape lighting. The neighboring properties were similarly grand, creating a street that seemed extracted from a luxury real estate magazine rather than a lived community. The palm trees swayed gently in the ocean breeze, their fronds rustling like whispered conversations. The grounds were impeccably maintained, flowering plants arranged in artistic patterns leading to the imposing front entrance. I paid the taxi driver and stood for a moment absorbing the scene, calculating once again how many years of my support had contributed to this display of affluence. The mental arithmetic only reinforced my growing certainty that something significant had shifted in our family dynamic, prompting this sudden acknowledgement of my role. I parked my 10-year-old car among the luxury vehicles and straightened my best blouse. The modest sedan looked conspicuously out of place among the gleaming European imports filling the circular driveway. My navy blue dress had been purchased 3 years earlier for a retirement celebration at the factory, classic in style but clearly not designer quality. I had applied makeup sparingly and wore my silver hair in its usual neat bun. The pearl earrings Joan had given me on our 30th anniversary provided the only adornment. I carried a simple black clutch containing my essentials, including reading glasses and medication. This presentation of my authentic self felt suddenly like an act of defiance in the face of the artificial world I was about to enter. The doorbell chimed expensively, echoing through what I knew were marble floors and custom woodwork. The sound was followed by the clicking of heels on tile, approaching from within. Marcelo opened the door with unusual enthusiasm. His cologne arrived before his handshake did, an overpowering scent that spoke of significant expense per ounce. His suit appeared newly purchased, the tailoring emphasizing his athletic build, while disguising the slight paunch developing at his midsection. His smile revealed recently whitened teeth, too perfect to be entirely natural. He embraced me with theatrical affection, exclaiming over my appearance with compliments that rang hollow, given his obvious assessment of my modest attire. The performance continued as he guided me into the foyer, where a uniformed server immediately appeared offering champagne from a silver tray. The guests were all strangers to me, but familiar to each other, their easy conversations indicating established relationships. I recognized the type immediately from years of observing upper management, socializing at corporate events, wealthy couples who measured friendships by influence and connections, who discussed vacation properties and private school admissions with the seriousness others reserved for global crises. The women wore designer dresses and expertly applied makeup, their jewelry substantial yet tasteful by the standards of their circle. The men clustered in small groups discussing investments and sports scores with equal authority. They assessed me with quick glances, placing me in the category of someone unimportant. The subtle shift in expression when Marcello introduced me revealed their confusion about my presence at such a gathering. The disparity between my appearance and the setting was obvious to everyone, creating an undercurrent of curiosity about why I warranted a celebration in this exclusive environment. Bianca floated among them in a dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my pension. The red, silky material draped perfectly over her slim figure, the color carefully chosen to stand out among the more conservative tones favored by her guests. Diamonds glittered at her throat and wrists, catching the light with every graceful gesture. Her hair had been professionally styled, her makeup flawless. She air-kissed my cheeks when I entered, the greeting of a casual acquaintance rather than a daughter. Her smile never reached her eyes when she introduced me. "This woman gave birth to me," she would say, as if explaining away a peculiarity. The phrasing created immediate distance, acknowledging biological connection while simultaneously emphasizing our different social spheres. She guided me through the room with a hand at my elbow, presenting me to each group with the same practiced introduction, before smoothly moving me along to the next. The performance was skillful, but transparent to anyone paying attention to the subtle signals passing between hostess and guests. Livia appeared at my side like a guardian angel, materializing from another part of the house with obvious relief at finding me. She wore a simple dress and minimal makeup, her natural beauty needing no enhancement. Her warm smile contrasted sharply with the polite masks worn by the other attendees. She squeezed my hand and whispered that she was happy to see me, the genuine affection in her eyes providing immediate comfort in the artificial atmosphere. Unlike her mother, who seemed determined to minimize our interaction, Livia remained beside me for much of the evening. She guided me to a comfortable seat in the living area, bringing me a fresh drink when my champagne remained untouched. The genuine warmth in her voice nearly brought tears to my eyes. She asked about my week, my friends from the factory, my current reading selection, all topics that recognized my existence beyond this performative event. At least one person in this house remembered what family truly meant. The dinner was elaborate and excessive. The dining room had been staged like a photo shoot from a luxury magazine with floral arrangements taller than table conversations. Fine china and crystal caught the light from the chandelier overhead, creating an atmosphere of studied opulence. Course after course of food designed to impress rather than nourish arrived with theatrical timing. Tiny portions of exotic ingredients arranged in architectural formations. Foams and reductions and deconstructed classics that required explanation from the server. Wine pairings accompanied each course, described in terminology that emphasized exclusivity and rarity. The conversation swirled around me, talk of exclusive resorts and private schools and investment opportunities. Names of influential people were dropped with casual precision, establishing connections to power and wealth. I ate quietly and observed the performance playing out before me. Bianca commanding attention, Marcello trying too hard to seem successful, Livia watching everyone, with those perceptive eyes that missed nothing. Throughout the meal I noticed strange undercurrents passing between Bianca and Marcello. Meaningful glances when they thought I was distracted by conversation, subtle nods when certain topics arose. They steered discussion occasionally toward health concerns and aging, with pointed mentions of friends dealing with elderly parents. One couple described their struggles with a father showing early signs of cognitive decline, the challenges of managing his finances while preserving his dignity. Marcello expressed exaggerated sympathy, suggesting they speak privately later about resources that had helped his own family in similar circumstances. The fabrication was delivered with such conviction that several guests nodded appreciatively at his apparent experience and concern. Bianca added anecdotes about forgetfulness and confusion observed in her social circle, the delicate balance between respect for independence and necessary intervention. The theme emerged too frequently to be coincidental, laying groundwork for something I could not yet fully discern. Then came the moment that changed everything. As dessert plates were being cleared, Marcelo stood and tapped his crystal glass for attention. The room quieted immediately, guests turning expectantly toward their host. He announced a special toast to honor me, his voice carrying the practiced cadence of someone accustomed to public speaking. The perfect mother-in-law, he called me. The woman who believed in their dreams when others might have counseled caution. The silent supporter who made their success possible through unwavering faith in their vision. The words were carefully chosen, acknowledging my financial contribution while recasting it as emotional support rather than practical assistance. I noticed the strange glances between him and Bianca, the slight tremor in his hands as he prepared the drinks. Artisanal gin with imported tonic, he explained, a special recipe just for me. A server appeared with a tray of prepared cocktails, but Marcelo waved him away, insisting this particular toast required his personal attention. I watched him closely as he mixed the drinks at the small bar cart positioned near the head of the table. His back blocked the view momentarily, but I saw the flash of a small bottle, the quick movement of his wrist as something was added to a specific glass. The knowledge crystallized in my mind with cold clarity. They were drugging me. My own daughter and her husband were trying to incapacitate me in front of witnesses. The implications were immediately clear and deeply disturbing. Control of my finances, claims of dementia, power of attorney, the perfect plan to secure continued access to my remaining assets while removing the inconvenience of my conscious participation. The conversation about elderly care now revealed its true purpose, laying groundwork for concerned intervention when I exhibited confusion. The guests were not merely dinner companions, but carefully selected witnesses to my apparent cognitive decline. The elaborate celebration suddenly made perfect sense, a performance designed to establish their loving concern before my public deterioration. The glass was placed before me with flourish, different from the others in subtle ways only. I would notice a slightly different level of liquid positioned precisely at my place setting. Marcelo lifted his in a toast, and everyone followed, faces turned expectantly toward me as the guest of honor. I smiled and lifted mine as well, feeling the weight of their collective attention. Livia watched me with sudden concern from across the table, as if sensing something was wrong. Her intuition had always been remarkable, her sensitivity to undercurrents in family dynamics unusually acute. I let my hand tremble slightly, playing the part of the emotional mother. My apparent vulnerability seemed to please Bianca, whose smile widened fractionally at this sign of weakness. When Marcelo turned to answer a question from another guest, momentarily distracted from his careful monitoring of my compliance, I made my move. With a lifetime of precision from handling numbers, I switched our glasses with a movement so subtle, it was invisible to everyone, the sleight of hand disguised by adjusting my napkin. The maneuver complete, I raised the untainted glass in acknowledgement of the generous toast. I sipped water for the rest of the evening while watching Marcelo slowly deteriorate. The effects were gradual, but unmistakable to my watchful eye. First came the slurred words, subtle enough that he attempted to disguise them by speaking more slowly. Then the confused expressions when conversation took unexpected turns, his responses increasingly disconnected from the actual topics being discussed. His coordination faltered as he tried to serve dessert, nearly dropping an expensive crystal dish before a server intervened smoothly. The guests exchanged uncomfortable glances as he began to ramble incoherently about business success and market dominance, claims growing more outlandish with each passing minute. Bianca grew increasingly mortified, her perfect evening crumbling before her eyes. Her attempts to guide conversation away from his deteriorating condition grew more desperate as his behavior became impossible to ignore. Several guests checked watches and murmured about early morning commitments, the universal signals of a social event concluding prematurely. I expressed concern for his health with all the innocence I could muster. Perhaps he worked too hard, I suggested. Perhaps the pressure was too much for him. The irony of my concerned performance was not lost on me, as I watched the trap they had set close around its unintended victim. The guests departed quickly after that, murmuring polite excuses that barely disguised their discomfort with the situation. The women collected purses and wraps. The men checked phones with sudden urgency. Promises to meet for lunch or golf were exchanged with the hostess, though the sincerity of these commitments seemed questionable given the evening's awkward conclusion. I offered to help clean up, but Bianca practically pushed me toward the door, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. Her careful makeup could not disguise the tightness around her mouth, the flush of humiliation spreading across her cheeks. She claimed Marcelo occasionally suffered from exhaustion, apologizing for his behavior while simultaneously minimizing its significance. The transparent attempt to salvage their reputation fell flat against the evidence her guests had witnessed. Firsthand, as I gathered my belongings from the entry closet, I could hear her in the kitchen berating the catering staff, displacing her anger onto convenient targets. Livia walked me to my car, insisting on escorting me despite her mother's sharp call for assistance with the departing guests. The night air had cooled considerably, carrying the salt scent of nearby ocean. Crickets chirped from manicured gardens, creating a peaceful backdrop to the tension emanating from the house behind us. Livia's face was troubled, her earlier warmth replaced by confusion and concern. She glanced back at the house several times as we walked down the curved driveway, clearly struggling with questions she was not yet ready to articulate. I hugged her tightly at my car door and told her to call me tomorrow. We would talk then, I promised. Some conversations required privacy and clarity, conditions impossible in the current environment. She nodded, sensing the importance of my words and the weight of unspoken understanding passing between us. My granddaughter had always been perceptive, her emotional intelligence far surpassing that of her parents. Tonight, that gift had allowed her to sense the undercurrents of manipulation and betrayal flowing beneath the polished surface of the celebration. I drove home with steady hands despite the rage building inside me. The familiar streets of Florianopolis passed in a blur as my mind processed the evening's revelations. The betrayal burned through my veins like acid, dissolving any remaining affection I might have harbored for my daughter and son-in-law. Years of financial support had not been enough. Years of overlooking their shallow values and materialistic choices had not satisfied them. They had graduated from exploitation to outright predation, willing to drug and humiliate me to gain complete control of assets they already benefited from substantially. The calculation revealed the true nature of their character with devastating clarity. The apartment welcomed me with its familiar silence, the modest furnishings and personal mementos a stark contrast to the artificial perfection I had just left. I went straight to my office and opened my safe, the metal box secured behind a painting João had purchased from a local artist 30 years earlier. The trust documents were exactly where I had left them, pristine and legally binding. The revocation clause was highlighted in yellow, a prescient mark made by an attorney who understood human nature better than I had when establishing the arrangement. The paragraph stated clearly that the grantor maintained the right to terminate the trust at any time for any reason, without prior notification to beneficiaries. The provision I had considered merely standard legal language now represented salvation and justice. I called my lawyer despite the late hour, finding his personal number in my carefully maintained address book. He answered on the third ring, his voice groggy with sleep. I apologized for the disturbance, but explained the urgency of the situation required immediate attention. He had managed my legal affairs for 20 years, having taken over from his father who had advised João and me since our marriage. The tie relationship transcended typical professional boundaries, approaching something more akin to friendship based on mutual respect and trust. He listened without interruption as I detailed what had happened and what I wanted done. His occasional murmurs of dismay, the only indication of his response to the disturbing narrative. His silence after I finished speaking told me everything. This was worse than he had expected from my initial words. The attempted drugging elevated the situation from financial exploitation to potential criminal behavior. He agreed to file the paperwork first thing in the morning, ensuring that the trust would be dissolved by noon. He also suggested documenting my recollection of the evening immediately, while details remained fresh. The contemporaneous record might prove valuable should further legal action become necessary. I thanked him for his prompt response and unwavering support. Promises of payment for after-hours consultation waved away with characteristic generosity. Sleep eluded me that night. I sat by the window watching the city lights below, replaying 15 years of manipulation and lies. The financial records spread before me testified to the staggering sum transferred over that period. Nearly 4 million reais had moved from my accounts to support their lifestyle and failed business ventures. The total represented the majority of what João and I had accumulated through decades of careful saving and prudent investment. We had lived modestly despite professional success, prioritizing financial security over momentary pleasures. Our dream of traveling during retirement, visiting the European villages where our grandparents had been born, exploring the historical sites we had read about together, had been sacrificed to maintain Bianca and Marcelo in luxury they had not earned. The money had never been the issue. I would have given them anything they needed if they had simply asked with honesty and respect. I would have helped them establish sustainable lives within realistic means, supported legitimate business efforts, ensured comfortable but not extravagant housing. But they had taken my generosity and twisted it into an entitlement. My love, into a resource to be exploited. Worse, they had tried to take my dignity and autonomy, that I could never forgive. Morning came with newfound purpose, the lack of sleep irrelevant against the clarity of my resolve. I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit, the one I had worn to board meetings and financial presentations. The charcoal gray suit with subtle pinstripes projected authority and competence, a visual reminder of the financial expertise that had guided my career and would now direct my personal decisions. My armor against the world. I prepared coffee and toast as usual, maintaining routine despite the extraordinary circumstances unfolding. The familiar actions provided grounding amid emotional turbulence, allowing me to focus on practical steps rather than dwelling on painful revelations. The call from my lawyer came at 11:30, earlier than expected. He confirmed that the trust had been legally dissolved, his efficiency expedited by the concerning nature of the situation. All automatic payments had been stopped immediately. The scheduled transfers to the mortgage company, school, credit card accounts, and investment funds had been canceled before processing. The money that would have been transferred that very day would remain in my accounts. The deed was done, the financial umbilical cord finally severed after 15 years of constant nourishment. I attended work as usual that day, finding comfort in the structured environment and familiar responsibilities. Colleagues commented on my unusual quietness but respected my privacy, attributing my subdued manner to fatigue or minor illness. The routine tasks of reviewing reports and analyzing projections provided welcome distraction from personal turmoil. Numbers had always been reliable companions, consistent and logical, in ways people often were not. The quarterly financial statements required my signature before submission to regulatory authorities, the careful review process absorbing my complete attention for several hours. By afternoon, I had regained sufficient emotional equilibrium to participate in a planning meeting, offering insights on cost reduction strategies with my customary precision. The separation between professional competence and personal crisis had always been a particular strength, one that served me especially well during this difficult transition. I waited 3 days for the reality to hit them. The delay was deliberate, allowing sufficient time for the absence of expected funds to manifest in practical consequences. I imagined the confusion when the school called about the missed payment. The private academy would have strict policies about financial delinquency, perhaps restricting access to online learning platforms or extracurricular activities as initial warning measures. The panic when the mortgage notification arrived, the formal letter advising of missed payment and potential penalties, the desperation as credit cards were declined and financial commitments went unmet. The household staff would expect regular compensation. Service providers would demand payment. Social obligations would require continued expenditure to maintain appearances. Their house of cards would collapse quickly without the invisible support that had held it up for so long. The financial infrastructure of their entire existence had been constructed on my contributions, a foundation now abruptly removed. The mathematical certainty of their situation brought a grim satisfaction, not from their impending distress, but from the restoration of natural consequences to artificial success. The phone rang exactly as I had expected it would. The caller ID displayed Bianca's name, the first direct contact since the disastrous dinner party. I answered with professional composure, the same tone I might use for an underperforming vendor or difficult client. Bianca was hysterical, her carefully cultivated social persona shattered by financial panic. She demanded to know what had happened to the transfers. The mortgage company had called with warnings of default. The school had emailed regarding payment delinquency. Credit cards had been declined during a luncheon with important social connections, creating humiliating scenes in exclusive restaurants. I listened calmly as she ranted about commitments and obligations, the impossibility of meeting financial responsibilities without the expected support. The sense of entitlement permeated every word, the concept that she might actually need to fund her own lifestyle clearly foreign and offensive. When she finally paused for breath, I spoke with the precision of the financial controller I had been for decades. The trust had been terminated pursuant to Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the agreement. All financial support had ceased permanently. Any further communication should be directed to my attorney, whose contact information she already had. She screamed then, the pretense of affection completely abandoned. The words poured out like poison, accusations and threats and promises of legal action. I had betrayed them, she claimed. I had destroyed their lives without warning. I had obligations, as a mother and grandmother that I was selfishly neglecting. I had promised to support them, committed to sustaining their lifestyle, agreed to back Marcelo's business ventures. Each claim twisted the reality of our arrangement, rewriting history to cast me as the villain in their financial collapse. I let her exhaust herself against the wall of my silence. When she finally ran out of venom, I said just one thing. You tried to drug me to steal my money. Then I hung up and blocked her number. The silence that followed felt like the first true peace I had known in years. The confrontation had been necessary, but completion brought profound relief, as if a physical weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I made tea and sat on my small balcony, watching twilight settle over the city with newfound appreciation for the simple security of my modest surroundings. Livia arrived at my door the following day with a small suitcase and red-rimmed eyes. Her appearance spoke of recent turmoil, her usual careful grooming replaced by hastily gathered clothing and uncombed hair. I welcomed her with open arms and no questions, understanding that explanations would come when she was ready to offer them. She had clearly fled some unpleasant scene at home, seeking refuge in the one place she associated with unconditional acceptance. I prepared her favorite meal, the simple chicken and rice dish she had loved since childhood. We ate in companionable silence at my kitchen table, the familiar routine providing comfort amid upheaval. When she finally began to speak, the words emerged tentatively at first, then with increasing certainty as she found her voice. She had witnessed explosive arguments between her parents following the discovery of terminated financial support. Accusations and blame had escalated to threats and ultimatums, revealing aspects of their relationship and values previously concealed behind careful facades. She described her father's panic when credit cards were declined, her mother's hysteria When contacted by the mortgage company, the carefully constructed image of successful professionals had crumbled overnight, revealing the hollow reality beneath prestigious addresses and designer wardrobes. We sat at my kitchen table as I explained everything from the beginning. The trust established 15 years earlier when Bianca and Marcelo claimed temporary financial challenges. The extension of support from months to years as deadlines for self-sufficiency continually shifted. The millions of reais transferred without acknowledgement or gratitude. The revocation clause that had remained dormant until activated by their betrayal. The drugged drink at the dinner party, prepared and presented with calculated intent to render me confused and potentially grant them control over my remaining assets. She listened with growing horror, occasionally wiping away tears that escaped, despite her efforts to remain composed. The revelations contradicted everything she had been told about family finances and business success. The comfortable lifestyle she had accepted as normal was suddenly revealed as artifice maintained through exploitation rather than achievement. When I finished, she held my hands across the table and apologized for what her parents had done. I assured her that she bore no responsibility for their actions. Children neither create nor control the moral environments they inhabit, particularly when deception forms the foundation of family dynamics. Her recognition of truth despite years of conditioning to accept illusion spoke to her fundamental character and discernment. The bank called to verify the changes to my accounts, the unusual activity triggering security protocols designed to protect older clients from potential fraud or exploitation. I explained the situation to the account manager, providing documentation of the trust dissolution and confirmation of my continued mental competence. The school administrator contacted me about Livia's tuition, the payment interruption threatening her continued enrollment during this critical final year. I had anticipated this and already arranged for a separate educational fund that would pay directly to the institution, bypassing her parents completely. The account would cover remaining tuition, graduation expenses, and university applications, ensuring her academic progress continued uninterrupted regardless of her parents' financial collapse. Her education would continue uninterrupted. Her future remained secure. Everything else was for Bianca and Marcelo to solve on their own, a long overdue lesson in financial reality and personal responsibility. Livia returned to the family home after 3 days with me, reluctantly accepting the necessity of collecting additional belongings and addressing practical matters related to school and social commitments. Her departure was accompanied by promises to call daily and visit regularly, commitments I knew she would honor, given her demonstrated integrity. The brief respite had allowed her to process initial shock and prepare strategies for navigating the dramatically altered family circumstances. Her resilience impressed me deeply. The capacity to absorb difficult truths and adapt to changing realities without surrendering to despair or denial. She had inherited this pragmatism from generations before her, the practical assessment of situations and methodical approach to challenges that had allowed our family to survive previous hardships. This inheritance would serve her well in the uncertain future ahead, providing stability amid the collapse of artificial supports and pretensions. Marcelo appeared at my workplace a week later, his arrival unannounced and unwelcome. The receptionist called with obvious discomfort, uncertain whether to grant access to the agitated man claiming urgent family business. I agreed to meet him, briefly, selecting the small conference room near the security desk, rather than my private office. The neutral territory would reinforce professional boundaries, while ensuring assistance remained nearby if his desperation manifested in concerning ways. He arrived with the superficial trappings of success still in place, the tailored suit and polished shoes maintaining appearances despite financial reality. His confident facade was cracking under financial pressure. His expensive watch was conspicuously missing. His designer clothes slightly rumpled as if worn multiple days without proper care. Dark circles beneath his eyes suggested sleepless nights spent contemplating financial ruin. I acknowledged his presence with professional courtesy, the same detached politeness I might offer any business acquaintance, and gestured toward the chair opposite mine. I agreed to speak with him in the small conference room where I had conducted countless negotiations over my long career. The familiar setting reinforced my professional identity and expertise, providing psychological advantage in the uncomfortable confrontation. He began with charm, his default approach to persuasion in all circumstances. He reminisced about family moments and shared holidays, selectively recalling instances of harmony while conveniently omitting years of exploitation and disrespect. The transparent attempt to manipulate emotional connections fell flat against my clear recollection of systematic exclusion from their lives, except when financial support was required. When that failed to move me, he switched to guilt, reminding me of my responsibility as a mother and grandmother. The welfare of his family, my family, hung in the balance. My stubbornness threatened their security and future prospects. The potential damage to Livia's social standing and educational opportunities featured prominently in this narrative, despite my direct knowledge of arrangements already made to protect her interests. When that too failed, he finally resorted to honesty, the desperation of their situation apparently sufficient to overcome habitual deception. They were drowning in debt. The mortgage was 3 payments behind even before I cut off the trust. The lender threatening foreclosure proceedings if substantial payment was not received within 30 days. His latest business venture had failed spectacularly, losing over 200,000 reais of borrowed money secured against assets that largely existed on paper rather than in reality. Credit card debt had accumulated to unsustainable levels, minimum payments barely covering monthly interest charges. The luxury vehicles were leased rather than owned, the payments structured to maximize immediate appearance rather than financial. Prudence. Designer wardrobes purchased on installment plans now threatened to drain accounts already emptied by mortgage demands. Without my support, they would lose everything within months. The dramatic collapse would devastate not just their financial standing, but social position, business relationships, and personal identities constructed entirely around projected affluence. He begged for a resumption of payments, even a reduced amount to tide them over until they could adjust their lifestyle and restructure obligations. The humiliation of this appeal was written clearly on his face, the unfamiliar experience of genuine supplication replacing his usual confident demands. I listened to every word without interruption, my expression revealing nothing of the complex emotions churning beneath professional composure. When he finished, I asked only one question, my voice calm and measured in the quiet room. "Did you put something in my drink at the dinner party?" The directness caught him off guard, momentarily shattering the practiced performance of contrition and concern. He flinched as if struck, then rallied with denials and confusion. The suggestion was absurd, he claimed. Why would they possibly risk harming the person who had shown such generosity? Perhaps I had misinterpreted some innocent action, confused by unfamiliar surroundings or unusual tension. The string of denials continued, growing increasingly elaborate as my silence extended. I repeated the question, my voice unchanged, expression unwavering. The persistence clearly unsettled him, his discomfort manifesting in nervous gestures and shifting gaze. The third time I asked, he crumbled under the weight of unwavering scrutiny. It was just a mild sedative, he claimed. Nothing dangerous. Just enough to make me seem confused and forgetful in front of their friends. They would have recorded my apparent disorientation, documented my inability to answer simple questions about dates or recent events. The evidence would have supported petition for conservatorship, allowing them legal authority to protect me from my obviously diminishing capacity. They needed control of my assets for better investment opportunities, he explained, as if the admission somehow justified the betrayal. They would have taken good care of me. The promise hung in the air between us, as worthless as the business plans that had consumed millions without producing results. I stood and straightened my papers, physical movements signaling conclusion, more effectively than words. My posture communicated resolute finality, closing discussion without room for further appeal. The meeting was over. There would be no more financial support, not now, not ever. The trust had been dissolved permanently through legal channels that could not be reversed. My remaining assets had been reorganized under management structures, inaccessible to them regardless of future legal maneuvers. If he or Bianca contacted me again, except in regard to Livia, I would file charges for attempted drugging and elder abuse. I had witnesses, I reminded him. Their friends had all seen his behavior that night, the progressive disorientation following consumption of the drink intended for me. The reputation they valued so highly would not survive such allegations, particularly given their precarious financial position and his history of business failures. The social connections they cultivated would distance themselves immediately from even the suggestion of such behavior, the potential association with elder abuse far more damaging than mere financial mismanagement. He left without another word, shoulders slumped in defeat. The bravado that had characterized his entrance had evaporated completely, replaced by the authentic desperation he could no longer disguise behind performative confidence. The consequences unfolded with mathematical precision over subsequent weeks, financial reality asserting itself against years of artificial prosperity. The foreclosure notice appeared on their property within weeks, the formal document posted prominently on the ornate front door that had once welcomed influential guests. The public declaration of financial failure eliminated any possibility of private resolution or maintained appearances. Luxury cars disappeared from their driveway one by one, repossessed by leasing companies tired of payment extensions and unfulfilled promises. The carefully cultivated image of success eroded with each visible symbol of wealth reclaimed by its actual owners. Social media accounts went eerily quiet after years of constant updates, featuring exotic destinations and exclusive experiences. The absence of carefully curated images spoke more loudly than any explicit acknowledgement of changed circumstances. Livia reported that her mother barely left her bedroom anymore, while her father spent days away on desperate business meetings that yielded nothing. The household staff had been dismissed, maintenance services cancelled, utilities threatened with disconnection due to non-payment. Their carefully constructed facade was crumbling rapidly, revealing the emptiness behind it. Livia divided her time between their increasingly dysfunctional household and my peaceful apartment, gradually transferring essential belongings to the small guest room I had prepared for her. Her presence brought unexpected joy to my quiet routines, her resilience in facing family dissolution inspiring my own continued healing. We established comfortable patterns of coexistence, respecting privacy while sharing meals and occasional evening films. She maintained academic excellence despite family turmoil, her focus on future university opportunities providing structure amid chaos. Our conversations ranged widely from mathematics to philosophy, literature to economics, her intellectual curiosity flourishing in an environment that valued substance over appearance. She spoke occasionally of her parents, reporting their deteriorating relationship with compassionate concern rather than bitter judgment. The ability to maintain empathy while establishing necessary boundaries reflected emotional maturity beyond her years. I encouraged this balanced perspective, emphasizing that recognizing toxic behavior need not eliminate genuine compassion for human struggle. Bianca made one final attempt at reconciliation, arriving at my apartment unannounced one evening as Livia and I prepared dinner together. Her appearance shocked us both into momentary silence. The physical transformation was dramatic and revealing. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a plain blouse that would have been unthinkable in her previous incarnation. Her makeup was minimal, her jewelry absent, her hair styled for convenience rather than impact. She looked more like the daughter I remembered from years ago, before ambition consumed her humanity. The stripped-away artifice revealed the woman beneath the carefully constructed persona, vulnerable and uncertain in this unfamiliar authenticity. For a moment, my heart wavered with instinctive maternal response to apparent suffering. Then I remembered the look she had shared with Marcello, as he handed me the drugged drink, the calculated betrayal prepared with cold deliberation, and my resolve returned. I invited her to join us for dinner, the neutral activity providing structure for what promised to be a difficult conversation. Livia set another place with quiet efficiency, her expression carefully neutral as she navigated this unexpected family reunion. She admitted everything without prompting. The financial desperation that had mounted over years of living beyond sustainable means. The failed businesses that consumed investment after investment without producing viable returns. The mounting debt concealed behind facades of continued prosperity. The plan to gain control of my assets through legal means by proving I was no longer competent to manage my own affairs. The staged dinner party designed to create witnesses to my apparent confusion. The drugged drink that would have rendered me disoriented and vulnerable to their manipulation. She claimed it had been Marcelo's idea, but she had gone along with it. Blinded by panic over their financial situation and unable to face the social humiliation of acknowledged failure. The admissions emerged haltingly at first, then with increasing fluidity as the relief of abandoned pretense overcame initial hesitation. They would lose the house within 30 days without immediate intervention, the foreclosure process now beyond negotiation or delay. Credit accounts had been closed, vehicles repossessed, household staff dismissed. Her voice broke as she described Livia's disappointment in them both. My granddaughter had seen her parents clearly for the first time, and it had destroyed the foundation of her world. The recognition came too late to preserve family bonds fractured by years of materialism and manipulation. I offered Bianca a cup of tea, which she accepted with surprise at this small gesture of normal hospitality. We sat in my small living room surrounded by photos of simpler times, modestly framed images documenting genuine family moments rather than staged perfection. I told her that Livia would always be provided for, through direct arrangements with her school and a trust that would activate on her 18th birthday. The educational foundation would fund university studies and initial adult independence, ensuring opportunities to develop her considerable potential regardless of her parents' circumstances. As for Bianca and Marcelo, they had made their choices and now faced the consequences. The money was not the issue, I explained. It never had been. The betrayal of trust, the lack of respect, the willingness to sacrifice my dignity for their comfort, those were unforgivable. The attempted drugging had merely revealed character flaws present throughout our relationship, making visible what I had chosen to ignore for too many years. The conversation concluded without dramatic confrontation or renewed promises, the exhausted resignation on Bianca's face suggesting she finally recognized the permanence of her altered reality. She left with empty hands, but perhaps a fuller understanding. No financial rescue would be forthcoming, no restoration of artificial prosperity. The relationship between mother and daughter had fractured beyond repair, but honesty had finally entered it. There was strange comfort in that, like lancing a wound that had festered too long. I felt lighter somehow, unburdened by expectations. I could never meet an affection that was never reciprocated. The familiar weight of responsibility for adult children capable of supporting themselves had lifted, allowing me to reclaim the retirement that should have begun years earlier. Livia and I resumed our dinner preparation, the interrupted routine gradually restoring normal rhythms to the evening. We spoke little about her mother's visit, respecting the significance of the encounter without allowing it to dominate our shared space. This balance characterized our developing relationship, acknowledgement of difficult realities paired with determination to build healthier patterns moving forward. The mansion in Jurerê International sold at auction for less than half its purchase price, the forced sale attracting bargain seekers rather than status-conscious buyers. The proceedings satisfied partial mortgage obligations, but left substantial debt requiring additional resolution. Bianca and Marcelo moved to a small apartment in a modest neighborhood, the kind of practical housing they had previously considered, beneath their social position. The adjustment proved painful initially, the confined space and basic amenities constantly reminding them of recently surrendered luxury. Gradually, necessity fostered adaptation, the requirements of daily function, overriding emotional resistance to reduced circumstances. Marcelo found work at a mid-level company where his charm served him well in sales, the position providing steady income without the risks or potential rewards of entrepreneurial ventures. The regular salary and defined responsibilities gradually restored structure to days previously filled with grandiose plans and minimal accountability. Bianca took a position as an administrative assistant, her first real job in over 20 years. The practical skills developed through managing household staff transferred reasonably well to office organization, providing foundation for potential advancement through demonstrated competence rather than social connections. They lived within their means for the first time in their adult lives, expenses balanced against actual income without supplemental support, disguising fundamental imbalance. The transition was painful, but perhaps ultimately healing. Reality had finally broken through the fantasy they had constructed, creating opportunity for authentic accomplishment and genuine self-respect, previously sacrificed to appearance and illusion. Livia flourished in her final year of school, secure, in the knowledge that her future remained stable, despite her parents' downfall. The educational trust ensured continued enrollment in the bilingual program that had nurtured her academic development, while providing resources for university applications and eventual enrollment. She maintained top academic performance despite family disruption, her resilience impressing teachers and counselors aware of her challenging circumstances. Her social circle adjusted naturally, genuine friendships surviving changed financial status, while relationships based primarily on family wealth and status gradually faded. The organic filtering process revealed much about character and values, painful lessons delivered earlier than typically experienced, but ultimately valuable in developing discernment. She spent weekends with me, learning to cook the simple dishes of my childhood and listening to stories of her grandfather and our early years together. The connection to family history provided context for current challenges, demonstrating resilience across generations and normalizing periods of difficulty, followed by adaptation and renewal. She asked questions about financial management and career planning, determined to develop practical skills essential for sustainable independence. She began to map out a future built on solid ground rather than shifting sand. I recognized my own practical nature in her approach and felt pride beyond measure. My granddaughter had absorbed the substantive values João and I had attempted to impart to Bianca, skipping a generation before finding fertile ground in which to flourish. Spring came to Florianopolis, bringing warm breezes and the scent of jasmine. The seasonal renewal mirrored internal transformations, gradually reshaping family dynamics and individual identities. Livia and I walked along the beach one Sunday afternoon, our regular weekend ritual providing physical activity and peaceful connection. The coastal path stretched before us, joggers and cyclists passing occasionally while birds circled overhead. We watched the waves chase each other to shore, the eternal rhythm providing perspective on temporary human concerns. The conversation meandered comfortably through various topics, from upcoming exams to favorite novels, university options to weekend plans. She had received acceptance letters from 3 universities, each offering different paths to her future. Engineering programs that would utilize her mathematical abilities, economics courses that might lead to financial careers, international relations possibilities that could connect her analytical mind with cross-cultural interests. She was weighing her options carefully, considering not just prestige but practical outcomes, including employment prospects and potential for meaningful contribution. I offered advice when asked, but mostly listened, recognizing the capable young woman she had become and respecting her developing judgment. The balance between guidance and autonomy characterized our evolving relationship, mutual respect, replacing the hierarchical patterns that had damaged previous family connections. We passed a young couple taking photos beside an expensive car, posed for maximum impact on social media. The woman adjusted her position repeatedly, seeking optimal angles to display designer accessories against luxury backgrounds. The man checked each image immediately, dissatisfied with multiple attempts despite their apparent perfection. The elaborate performance continued without acknowledgement of observers, the participants fully absorbed in creating impressions rather than experiencing the beautiful coastal setting surrounding them. Livia smiled ruefully and commented that her parents had wasted years chasing such moments, sacrificing substance for appearance. They had constructed an illusory life that existed primarily through carefully filtered images and selective presentation. The effort of maintaining facades ultimately consuming the authentic experiences those facades were meant to represent. The wisdom in her observation confirmed what I already knew. She had learned the most valuable lesson of all. True worth comes from character and choices, not possessions and perceptions. Genuine security arises from practical abilities and realistic assessment, not artificial prosperity maintained through unsustainable means. The painful collapse of her parents' carefully constructed world had provided education no affluence could purchase, perspective many spend lifetimes without acquiring. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The spectacular natural display attracted attention from everyone along the beach, momentarily uniting strangers in shared appreciation. We stopped to admire the view, standing in comfortable silence side by side. Families gathered belongings. As day concluded, couples walked hand in hand toward beachfront restaurants. Solitary figures contemplated the meeting of sky and ocean with quiet reverence. The scene embodied authentic community experience, connection through shared reality, rather than competitive display or strategic networking. The peace I felt in that moment was complete and genuine, unrelated to financial considerations or social positioning. I had lost a daughter but gained something more precious: self-respect, boundaries, and the knowledge that even at 68 years old, it was never too late to stand up for yourself. The family configuration had changed irrevocably. Relationships transformed through necessary confrontation with long-ignored truths. Yet within that painful transformation, new possibilities had emerged for authentic connection based on mutual respect rather than exploitation or obligation. The altered landscape contained unexpected beauty alongside acknowledged loss, like a forest regenerating after necessary fire clears accumulated dead wood and allows new growth. I still check my financial records every evening, a habit from decades of professional discipline. The spreadsheets remain meticulously updated, each transaction recorded with precise dates and amounts. The retirement accounts have begun modest recovery after years of depletion, careful management, gradually restoring resources intended for my later security. The numbers align precisely, each account in perfect balance. The mathematical accuracy provides satisfaction beyond practical considerations, representing restoration of order to systems previously distorted by manipulation and excess. But now I understand that the most important accounts are not measured in currency. They are calculated in respect given and received, in honesty maintained even when difficult, in boundaries established and honored. The integrity of relationships proves more valuable than material accumulation, authentic connection, more satisfying than artificial admiration. The ledgers of human interaction follow principles as precise as financial accounting, imbalances eventually requiring correction, regardless of temporary disguise or distraction. By those measures, despite everything, I consider myself wealthy beyond measure. The reconciliation of internal and external reality, of stated values and actual choices, of promised respect and demonstrated behavior, creates harmony no luxury purchase could provide. The alignment of truth with action offers security no investment portfolio could guarantee. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your dignity? And what did that choice ultimately cost you?